Check out any cruise website and you'll get a good idea of the impression that cruise lines want to make on their potential customers. It's nothing but blue water, sunshine, smiles, and people having a lot of fun. It seems like the worst thing that might happen on the entire trip is that you'll have to wait for more desserts to be put out on the buffet. In other words, cruising is painted to be a paradise. And to be fair, there is a lot to like. Cruising is fun. You'll be well fed and often it's tremendous value for a vacation. If it weren't, then tens of millions of people wouldn't sail each year with tons of repeat cruisers. If you take a cruise and don't have a great time, then that's usually your own fault, not the cruise lines. But there are some things that you won't find on the colorful websites or on the fun TV ads that you see. Or maybe you won't even notice them at all, but they're still there on a cruise. Here's what most people don't tell you about taking a cruise. One of the techniques that cruise lines use to get you excited is to show ridiculously low headline fares. Fares that are only a couple $100 or less than $500 for a week-long cruise are common. But by the time you actually book that deal, what you end up paying is much higher. Now, this isn't some bait and switch deal, it's just how cruises are priced, but to us it could be clearer. Airlines used to do something similar but are now required to advertise the total cost of a ticket. First, the headline price for a cruise that you normally see is for one person based on double occupancy. So a $500 fare is actually $1,000 for the cabin, whether two people sail or just one person goes solo. On top of that, there are the port fees and taxes, which can run hundreds of dollars depending on the cruise. Then you have gratuities, which for a couple sailing on a 7-day trip are typically around $200 total. At the end of all these extra costs, the price of your cruise is much higher than the headline prices advertised. To be sure, all of these prices are disclosed before you buy, but a final tally often isn't shown until right before payment. One of the big draws of cruising is that you pay one fare and your room, food, and entertainment are all included. While you don't have to spend any more money on your trip, that's not usually what happens. Public cruise lines break down the money they make into a couple of large categories when they report financial results. One is the cruise fare and the other is onboard spending. The onboard spending category involves everything you use money for on the ship. This includes your gambling, alcohol, souvenir shopping, the spa, and more. To be sure, these items are all optional. However, they are big moneymakers. Cruzely.com research shows that the onboard spending on average is about 35 to 40% of the cruise fare. That number does vary based on the company. But if you spend $1,000 on your cruise fare, expect to spend about $350 to $400 once on the ship. And that's just an average across all passengers and all cruise lines. Most cruises are far from all-inclusive. Even with the cruise fare and onboard spending, you aren't done with your wallet just yet. One other thing that many cruisers don't realize is the gratuity that you'll be charged across the ship. Now, many passengers do know that you're charged gratuity in the normal way. If you cruise, a daily gratuity is charged to your room account each day. This covers your room steward, the dining room staff, and others on board. But many people don't realize that other gratuities are charged for anything service-based on the ship, such as getting a drink at the bar. And those gratuities, they can be expensive. It's 15 to 20% of your tab, depending on the cruise line. It's the same in specialty restaurants and the spa. We've even seen gratuity added for automated beer pouring stations that don't even have a bartender. Now, there's nothing wrong with showing some appreciation to those who offer service on a cruise, but it's definitely not something that many first-timers expect when they board. Now, with the recent health crisis, staying healthy is on everyone's mind. It's especially at the top of the list for cruise lines who are pulling out all the stops to get back to cruising safely. But even before COVID, illness was on the mind of the cruise lines. Norovirus and other fast-spreading stomach bugs have hit cruise ships for years, regularly making headlines. Now, your individual chances of getting sick on the cruise, that's always been relatively low despite the headlines you might see. With millions of passengers sailing each year, a small percentage gets sick. But gastro illness is common enough that the CDC keeps tabs on outbreaks on cruise ships, going all the way back to 1994. A ship is required to report an outbreak when 2% or more of the passengers and crew have an illness for a ship sailing in U.S. waters. Numbers vary from year to year, but about 10 to 14 outbreaks are reported annually. Now, one of the big decisions on which cruise you book is, of course, where the ship goes. Passengers will agonize over one itinerary versus another. Yes, the itinerary does make a difference, but it's smarter to make a bigger deal over which ship you sail versus where it goes. That's because you spend the vast majority of your time on the cruise ship versus being in a port of call. On a 7-day cruise that leaves at 5 p.m., gets back at 7 a.m. at the end of it, your vacation is 158 hours long. With 3 ports of call with stops of 8 hours each, that's a total of 24 hours in port. That means only about 15% of the entire cruise is spent in port. The remaining 85% you are on the ship. That's why it's a good idea to pick a ship with plenty to do and see on board. And it's also a good idea to get a cabin that you'll be plenty comfortable in. After all, the ship is going to be your home away from home for your vacation. Any casino, whether you are on a cruise ship or on land, seems to always have the same sort of marketing. You see pictures of young, attractive people with a drink in hand, shouting with excitement after a big win. Anyone who has been gambling, however, knows that's not really how casinos are. Add to that the fact that the odds are always in favor of the house. We all know that, but some casinos, including many that you find on cruise ships, seem to put the odds of coming out ahead even more in the house's favor. Payouts in cruise casinos typically aren't that great. For example, the gold standard for a video poker machine is a 9-6 machine. This is one that pays 9 credits for a full house and 6 for a flush. This gives an expected payout of 99.5% if proper strategy is used over the long term. On cruise ships, you will often find 6-5 machines, meaning they offer a 94.9% payback instead. For blackjack, you'll often find tables that pay 6-5 on blackjack instead of the normal 3-2. If you play at a higher limit table, then you might find some 3-2 payouts. So go to the casino and have fun, but if your plan is to get the best payouts, then you're often better off with land-based casinos. The cruise industry is regularly under fire from environmental groups, and while the lines do appear to be making changes to improve their environmental footprint, including taking steps to remove single-use plastics and moving toward cleaner burning fuels, it seems there is still some room to improve. For instance, a recent study by Dr. Ryan David Kennedy from Johns Hopkins University took air samples around several ships during a cruise. He found that, quote, concentrations of particulate matter on the decks of these ships are comparable to concentrations measured in polluted cities, including Beijing and Santiago. Despite being on the open water and in open air, vacationers and cruise ship staff may be exposed to elevated concentrations of particulate matter. According to CNN, Carnival Corporation, whose ships were at the center of this study, said that it coordinates its cruises with, quote, national and international regulatory bodies like the EPA to ensure the utmost safety of our guests and crew, and that tests of the air quality on its ships meet or exceed every requirement. Independent testing on our funnels, which is the area where the exhaust originates, further validates our claims, the company said. No one likes being sold, but on a cruise, sometimes it can feel like you paid a cruise fare for the luxury of entering a shopping mall. Not only are there plenty of places to spend your money, including stores selling everything from photos to expensive jewelry and watches, but there's also a lot of advertising. From the moment you step on the ship, you'll be hit with offers. Drink packages, spa treatments, excursions, and more are all offered. Now, to be sure, it's not an aggressive sales pitch or pushy sales tactics, but the hum of sales being offered is always in the background, whether it's a mention during announcements on the ship's loudspeakers or a flyer put on your cabin door. Of course, it's easy to see the why behind these pitches. Inviting people to spend more on the ship means more revenue for the cruise lines. It's just not something that's mentioned in all the fancy marketing by the cruise lines. Now it's your turn. If you've taken a cruise, what didn't you know going in that surprised you once you were on the ship? Let us know in the comments below. As well, be sure to like and subscribe. You can always visit us for more at Cruzely.com.